So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. Running the risk of repeating myself, it was an incredibly easy book to read, perfect for a young adult or someone who was wanting to test out the fantasy waters, so to speak, or even someone who already likes romantasy and is looking for something more like a palate cleanser. Hi everyone, my name is Tahereh Mafi and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our Panic at the Book Club book of the week, which is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message. A teenage girl is held captive, locked in a cell by the re-establishment, a harsh dictatorship that is in charge of a crumbling world. But this is no ordinary teenager. Julia is a threat to the re-establishment's power. A touch from her can kill. That's all it takes, one touch. Not only is she their biggest threat, but she's potentially the most powerful weapon they could have. Juliet has never really fought for herself before, but when she's reunited with the only person who has ever cared for her, the depth of emotion and the power within her just is explosive. So this is the spoiler-free part where we'll discuss any spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. Most of the chapters in this book were all pretty short. I mean, most of them were around 5 to 10 pages, so perfect if you want to read a chapter or two before bed or on your commute to work. I think the short chapters, combined with the fact that the writing itself was just really incredibly easy to read, made this book feel really fast-paced. It always felt like the story was progressing and moving along, which, trust me, when it comes to fantasy, isn't always the case. There were times where I think I would have liked a little bit more detail. Like, sometimes in the book, hours would pass by, but due to the amount of information and detail we were given, that timeline never really seemed to line up. Like, it would feel like it couldn't have taken more than half an hour for the main character to do everything that they were meant to have done, if that makes sense. It was a much easier fantasy to read than most, which probably means that it's a perfect one for young adults and those who don't tend to like more serious fantasy. Like, I love a good fantasy, but I do struggle with some more epic fantasies simply because there's just too much information. It would probably also make a really good read for someone who's interested in trying the genre out for the first time, especially if they already like romance. I'd probably describe this book as like a stepping stone to a more mature and adult romantasy, something like A Shadow in the Ember, which is considerably less suitable for a young adult, but it does have a lot more information, a lot more detail, and I think it's around double the amount of pages as well. If I had to compare this to any other book, it would probably be something like Once Upon a Broken Heart, which I absolutely loved. Once Upon a Broken Heart is another YA romantasy series that's super easy to read and is also a brilliant stepping stone into a fantasy world with a very strong romantic element. It also really gives me a strong The Girl with No Soul vibes. Now moving on to that part of the video, but I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first because beyond this point there'll definitely be spoilers. I was really suspecting the wrong characters. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't doubting Adam's sincerity at least a little bit. For a little while there, at least until we met the little brother, I was suspecting that Adam was the one with ulterior motives and he was going to be the one to take her to the resistance. But then again, I don't think I can be blamed for not suspecting Kenji, a character that, up until that point, had only even been mentioned once. I've read enough fantasy dystopian books to know that there's always a resistance that's introduced at some point. I just found that it was awfully convenient that the character that was going to introduce them to this resistance was someone we'd not actually ever met before. It wasn't exactly this huge issue, it just wasn't the most creative writing choice. That being said, there was something about this writing style that I absolutely loved. The crossed out lines and the repeat text was brilliant. I mean, it was a great representation of Juliet's state of mind in those moments. I think that's one reason as to why I like reading in first person so much. I think if it's done right, I can really see the world as that character would. I particularly liked the fact that throughout the book it happened less and less as her state of mind improved. I mean, this girl has been locked up for a while and hasn't spoken to anyone for a long time, so you can't blame her for being a little bit odd. Although in the beginning it says that Juliet hasn't spoken out loud for 264 days. Like, there's not a chance that that would happen to me. Like, I'm not even locked up in isolation and I already talk out loud to myself, so I still kind of feel like I'm developing my own opinions on some of the characters. I think because there wasn't a ton of detail, it was kind of hard to get a read on some of them. Like, Warner was obviously the bad guy, but I felt sad for him more often than I was angry at him. So I do hope that the next few books will shed more light on some of the characters. Although I did like Julia and Adam's adorable relationship, I think my favourite duo was actually Kenji and Juliet. It was cute and funny, and I actually think that their interactions had the most character to them. I really liked the little brother James. I thought he was really cute and funny. Like, yeah, James, I'm really glad that you're taking this terrible news so well, but can you chill the fuck out with your excitement just a little bit, because we could all die. The ending. I liked the twist. I wasn't surprised, but again, I wasn't fully expecting it. I do have to admit that I did find the whole superhero costume thing a little cheesy. Like, I'm not really sure how I felt about that one. It made sense to have clothing that suits your power, like clothing that you can wear in any environment and you don't have to fear touching and hurting other people. It's just, I don't know. Like, did anyone else picture this cheesy, bright purple superhero costume? Like, I think that's the problem sometimes when you get such limited details in books. I think that it can leave too much to the imagination. But I guess my opinion on that will develop over the next few books, as hopefully I'll be able to imagine it a little bit better. So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. Running the risk of repeating myself, it was an incredibly easy book to read, perfect for a young adult or someone who was wanting to test out the fantasy waters, so to speak, or even someone who already likes romantasy and is looking for something more like a palate cleanser. I don't think someone who's into more serious fantasy would enjoy it quite so much. The detail just wasn't there. But it was fast-paced, it was fun, and it had a genuinely intriguing plot. So will I be reading any more by Tahereh Mafi? Do you really think I could walk into the works and not pick up the whole series for a bargain price? Because I just wouldn't be me if I didn't. As much as I wanted to pick up the next book in the series immediately after reading this one, the next book I need to read is a long one, so I need to get a start on that first. But I can picture that this series will become a go-to between other books. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? This is the first fantasy book Ant has read. He really enjoyed it. It was easy to follow even for a first-time fantasy reader, so he would recommend it to anyone who maybe would want to start getting into fantasy. Ant liked the chapter lengths, which were no longer than 10 pages and made him feel like he was going through the book really quickly. Things really kicked off within the last 150 pages, which kept him gripped and made him want to know what was going to happen next. While he wasn't blown away by the twist, he wasn't expecting it either. Kenji was his favourite character. He was cocky and made him laugh on a few occasions, which is always good. I wholeheartedly agree. I loved their back and forth. And really enjoyed Shatter Me. Not only has he already got the full series, but immediately after finishing this one, he's already started book 1.5, which is the first novella. Next week we'll be discussing When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker, so don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday the 2nd of September at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok or Instagram. The following week will be One of Us is Lying, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below, along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye!